Hello, ready to start? All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Holtz, and I am the co-founder of the Jewish Future Pledge. We are a worldwide movement working to ensure vibrant Jewish life continues for generations to come. How do we think we could do it? We have an unprecedented opportunity to secure the financial future of the Jewish people. We are living through the greatest wealth transfer in history. Over the next 25 years, an estimated $68 trillion of wealth is going to pass to the next generation. And an estimated 6.3 trillion is being left to charity. This could be our greatest opportunity, or potentially missed opportunity, to secure our Jewish future. The Jewish Future Pledge is leveraging this wealth transfer by calling on Jews to pledge 50% or more of the charitable giving in their estate plan to support the Jewish people or the state of Israel. Imagine what would happen if 1 million people committed to leaving a legacy gift to secure our Jewish future. We also encourage people to share their wisdom, values, and life lessons by writing legacy letters, ethical wills, and having important intergenerational conversations. It is my great pleasure to be here today with Rabbi Steve Leder. Rabbi Leder is the senior rabbi at the Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles, one of the world's largest Jewish congregations. He is many things, including the author of The Extraordinary Nature of Ordinary Things, More Money Than God, the best-selling More Beautiful Than Before, and the book we are here to discuss today, The Beauty of What Remains. Rabbi Leder, this book moved my heart and my soul. It talks about the legacy you leave, which is something I have spent the last 2 years thinking about nonstop. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amy. I'm really honored to be here with you. I'm a big believer in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to jump right in. On the cover of your book, you say how our greatest fear becomes our greatest gift. And at the heart of the book is the idea that if we could understand death and loss, we can truly learn to live. How do you suggest we turn our fear of death and loss into our greatest gift?
Well, this operates on many different levels. Let's just start with the most basic and primal, which is our fear of death itself. One of the things in the book that has caused virtually every interviewer to ask me about is this idea that I articulate in the book that when you're actually dying, it's a fearless process. I've been at the bedside, this is not rabbinic hyperbole, I've been at the bedside of at least 1,000 dying people. And when I say dying, Amy, I'm talking about actively dying, hours, a day or two away from death. And over my 33 years, I have asked every time, are you afraid? And not one person who's actively dying has been afraid.
Wow.
And yet, yes, and yet, every one of us at some point in our life is afraid of dying that moment, or afraid that we'll be afraid when we're actually dying. And there's a kind of counterintuitive piece that comes from this realization. So I can assure you, if you are anxious about dying, it's not your day. Anxiety is only for the living. People who are actively dying, the closest thing I can give you as an example or metaphor is when you have felt the most intense jet lag in your entire life, when you just feel like a complete zombie, and all you want to do is crawl into bed and pull the covers up over your head. You're not depressed about going to sleep. You're not anxious about going to sleep. You're not angry or bitter about going to sleep. It's the most natural thing your body wants to do. And in my experience, which I accept as anecdotal, but it is pretty vast, that's death. Now, the dying sometimes have fears, but not for themselves. They may be worried, are the kids going to take care of mom? Are the kids going to take care of each other? Those kinds of things. But for themselves, never. It's nothing but peace. And most of us die. Most of us. Obviously, people do have strokes and die in car accidents, but most of us die at the end of some kind of disease or decline, which itself carries us and prepares us for death. It weans us from life in a sense. So that's the most basic, I think I would say, primal understanding of what I meant by how we can turn this fear into something more positive. We can stop living being afraid of dying. But more important than that, or as important as that, is this understanding that I hopefully articulate well in the book, that death is the great teacher when it comes to leading a more meaningful and more beautiful life. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that death is really the only teacher, the only thing that gives meaning to life. Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends, and it's true. You know, how meaningful would a deathless life be? Imagine if you and I, Amy, and everyone on this call, we all lived deathless lives. What would that look like? We would be something other than human, right? No one would get married, no one would have children, no one would have any ambition. It really would be a meaningless existence. I'm going to paraphrase the poet Wallace Stevens, who basically said, the beauty of a flower is that it fades. I mean, that's why plastic flowers don't move us, because they have no death. They have no life. They have no meaning. They have no beauty, no power. This is true of us. It's death that grants meaning to our lives. And I think you and I are of the same generation. And I would say we start to appreciate that more fully as we age and as time becomes more precious. And that fear of death, that recognition that we are only human and our lives will end, can actually be turned and appreciated and used to create a more meaningful and beautiful life. That's the goal. You know, people said to me, Steve, how did you spend 2 years writing a book about death? And I said, I didn't. I spent 2 years writing a book about what death and how death can impel us to lead a more beautiful life. That's the point.
Wow, that's intense. That's heavy. I once heard somebody say that a house of Shiva is so much more meaningful than going to a party. And
well,
I
yeah,
found
unless
that to be true.
Well, yes, and because it's real.
Right.
Right? Because it's real, because it's not kabuki empathy or kabuki interest or kabuki caring. It's real. Now, you're hitting a sore subject for me, which is most Jews don't understand the difference between a party and a Shiva these days, which is very sad, I think, because it kind of denudes Shiva of its real power and efficacy. But ideally, yes, ideally, our purpose is much greater at a Shiva than a party.
Yeah, you really reflect and think about what you're doing and what you want to do. It's very powerful.
And you're really evidencing empathy for another human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
You've experienced loss from the perspective of a rabbi who has presided over 1,000 funerals. That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
In your book, you distinguish between this experience, Steve Leader, the rabbi, and your experience coping with the death of your father as Steve Leader, the son.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the loss of your father taught you about death that you didn't understand before?
Well, to be honest, I can hit 2 or 3 of the major points, but that's really what the book is about. You know, Amy, I wrote the book in a sense as a kind of an apology. Just to give you the quick backstory, on my 30th anniversary as a rabbi at the temple, at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, I gave a Kol Nidre sermon about the 10 things death had come to teach me about life. And I did it on Kol Nidre because a lot of Jews know Kol Nidre is the Jewish Day of the Dead. Yom
Right.
Kippur is the Jewish Day of the Dead. It's meant to mimic death. It's meant to force us to think about our deaths so that we change our lives, right?
Right.
So, for example, we wear white because the burial shroud is white. We fast because the dead neither eat nor drink. The Kol Nidre service begins by removing 3 Torahs from the Aron, from the Ark, right? Those 3 Torahs represent the 3 judges in the heavenly tribunal that legend has it we will stand before to plead our case. And by the way, the most chilling part of this whole metaphor is, so there we are standing before these 3 metaphorical judges, staring into the Aron, which is empty, and the Hebrew word for ark and the Hebrew word for coffin is the same word.
Really? Wow.
Okay, so if you really understand the metaphor and the drama of the evening, you understand its intent, okay? So I gave this sermon, and 1 year later to the day, I buried my father in Minneapolis after a 10-year journey through Alzheimer's.
Oh my God.
And in that experience, not as Rabbi Steve Leader, but as Steve Leader, the son burying his father, I realized, as I say in the prologue of the book, that everything I said in that sermon the year before was just 1 degree shy of the real and deepest truth. And I wrote this book to bring the reader and myself to that 1 degree deeper embrace of the truth that death comes to teach us about life. Now, quickly, what were some of those things I had to readjust? The first thing that I rethought was grief. I was raised, you were raised, everyone younger than us on this call was raised under the umbrella of the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of death, 5 stages of grief. And that's a construct that implies that grief is a linear process. First you feel A, then B, then C, then D, then E, then F, and then you're done, right? I learned that grief is nothing like that at all. In fact, in the book, I say anybody who thinks the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line doesn't understand grief, because grief is non-linear. It is much more like waves, and they come very close together and very large at first. They do eventually come further apart, and sometimes you can have beautiful calm seas for a week, a month, a year, a decade even. And then your back is turned, and out of nowhere, a rogue wave can just rise up and take you down. And to extend this metaphor, this was the real change in me. First of all, I learned about waves and not a linear process. But more important, you don't know me at all, but those who do will assure you that of the truth of what I'm about to say. Before my father died, the old Steve Leader, when seeing a wave coming at him of any kind, hard work, funerals, pain, anxiety, didn't matter. My default setting was, I'm going to plant my feet, chest forward, and I'm going to stand my ground because I am more powerful than any wave. And now I know there's a better way. The better way is when a wave is coming at you, is to lie down and let it wash over you and just float with it. Just float with it until you can stand up again. And you know what? Maybe even reach out a hand to see if there's someone there to help lift you from this suffering. I used to say, when I would walk a family into the chapel to begin the funeral, I would look you in the eyes, Amy, and I would say, Amy, the most honest and helpful thing I can say to you right now is it won't always hurt so much. And I don't say that anymore. Now what I say is, Amy, the most honest and helpful thing I can say to you right now is it won't always hurt so often. That's the truth. The former is a half-truth. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and maybe this is related to the fact that my father had Alzheimer's for 10 years, but I don't think so. I think it's true in all cases. The second thing I had to rethink was memory. Rabbis are full of platitudes about memory. May her memory be a blessing. He'll live on in your memories, okay? I mean, even Wolf Blitzer says it on CNN. But what I learned because of my father's Alzheimer's and death is that there's a duality to memory we don't talk about. Yes, memory is beautiful, and it really, really hurts. It's both. In the book, I say it's like being caressed and spat on at the same time. That's memory. And that's the truth of memory. And understanding that there's this duality to memory makes it easier to remember. I thought Joe Biden did an amazing job in the inaugural address, and we all know he's a guy who knows more about loss than any person should have to. When he said, in order to heal, you have to remember, and it hurts to remember sometimes. And that's the truth. So there's this duality to memory that needs to be recognized. And then just one more very quickly, and I think COVID has taught all of this also, because COVID is fraught with all kinds of losses and deaths, not just physical deaths. We can talk about that if you want to. But I think the most obvious thing that I learned from that death that moved me from rabbi to human being, and that's sort of the golden thread through the book, is something you'd think we all know. I say we're all standing knee deep in a river and we're dying of thirst. I mean, they're all around us are things so obvious that we just don't grasp. For me, it was this. What this death came to teach me is that no matter how many times, this is still hard for me to talk about, no matter how many times we say, I love you, and no matter how many times we hold and are held by the people we love, it's never enough. It's never enough. More really is better when it comes to love.
Oh my God, I could talk to you for an hour about that. I'm like shivering from those answers. Yeah, I had a friend who died in college, and 10 years later, I thought I was over it. And 10 years later, I just had a breakdown, and you just
a rogue wave.
Yeah. And then letting it go through you. I think so many of us spend so much time avoiding the pain and going towards behaviors, drinking, smoking, whatever, to avoid the pain. But the only way through it is through it. And, this dual memory, we're going to have another conference call.
Okay.
That was unbelievable. Wow. I want to get through all my questions, though, although I'd like to stay there.
You can. I mean, it's not a race. It's okay. Whatever moves you will move everyone else.
Well, share a little bit more about COVID. What were you going to say about COVID? Well, that's on all of our minds.
Yeah. It became pretty clear to me pretty early on that COVID was all about loss and grief. And look, some of us have literally lost loved ones, but we have all, I think, most frighteningly, lost our sense of invulnerability. I think we all realize now how vulnerable we are as individuals, and this is the scariest part, as a species, right? Our sense of invulnerability and invincibility is gone. Secondly, lots of us lost money. We lost jobs. We lost the right for our children to be in school, which is where they belong. We lost dreams. And this is related to what we were talking about a few moments ago. We all lost the most fundamental need and pleasure of being human, which is touch, which is to hold and hug the people we love. And these are all losses. We're all going to grieve for them. I think that the pandemic is going to have a very long psychological and spiritual tail. I literally got my second vaccine about 2 hours ago. And that may end it for my body, but it is not going to end it for my mind. And I think there's some positive things about this. This is why I called the book The Beauty of What Remains. If we can hold on to what we've learned, what have we learned? We've learned the simple pleasure of holding and being held, how important that is, right?
Yeah.
We've learned that stuff is not very important. There's a chapter in the book called Nobody Wants Your Crap, right? And that's what it's about, right? We spend our lives working to amass all this stuff that means absolutely nothing, right? I think that we've all learned that a little is a lot, and that good is great. Now, that's a pretty powerful way to go through life. We just have to do our best to make sure we don't revert back to our default settings, to our crazy lives. You know, one of the things I've learned from the pandemic that I'm committed to holding on to is that a busy life and a meaningful life are not the same thing.
Not at all.
You know, despite what our society teaches us, a busy life is just a centrifuge that pulls you apart from what matters and who matters. A busy life and a meaningful life are not the same thing. And hopefully we can hold on to that in the aftermath of the pandemic, when that temptation comes back to drive and buy and sell and drive and buy and sell. And I hope to hell we've learned something. You know, one of the things I often say to people who come to me in trouble is, you're going through hell. Your job is to make sure you don't come out of hell empty-handed, right? It's not worth the lessons we've learned. I wish those 500,000 people were still alive and we were still idiots about our lives, okay? We don't get to choose that, right? I have a friend who says he's given up all hope of a better past. Okay, we all have to give up
Great
all
line.
hope.
That's a great line. I'm going to use that.
It's very wise, right? We have to give up all hope of a better past. The question is, can we come out of this hell without being empty-handed? Will it make our lives more beautiful and more meaningful? And I really hope everyone here is committed to a yes.
I certainly hope so, because these were some very big lessons. I'm not so optimistic, because I think we're all going to get back into our busy lives. And I really believe God had a message for every one of us. And I do pray that people take it and they remember it.
I sure as hell hope so.
I'm not so hopeful.
You know, Dostoevsky said his greatest fear was that his life would not be worthy of his suffering. That is a very powerful idea. We've all suffered, some more than others, yes. And our society has certainly suffered. And COVID took the lid off, took our blinders off to the degree of suffering that exists for so many in our country. So I think a lot about what Dostoevsky said is, can I be worthy of the suffering I have endured and the suffering I have witnessed? Can my life be worthy of that? That's a productive question.
It's very powerful, very powerful. I want to get back to that chapter in your book, which was my absolute favorite, called Nobody Wants Your Crap. That chapter made me laugh and cry. So, and it also ties into what you said, which is that there's never enough love.
Yeah.
What you said is, you talk about the power of ethical wills, and what matters most is not the things we leave, but our spiritual and ethical legacy of love. But what you pointed out, which was so true, is we spend so much time and money thinking about who gets our stuff when we die.
Yeah.
So we at the Jewish Future Pledge, I'm all about sharing your stories, your wisdom, your life lessons. We encourage people to write ethical wills. Can you share more about why the ethical will is so important and give some guidance on how to go about writing one?
Well, My next book is actually going to be a how-to book on writing an ethical will.
All right, we get the first webinar.
Okay. I think it's so important. And one of the things, because this book was so broadly accepted, I mean, it did extraordinarily well. Tens of thousands of Gentiles who knew nothing about the idea of an ethical will are now enlightened to this idea. I would say almost every non-Jew who interviews me about the book raises the ethical will chapter because they've never heard of it, never thought of it. So look, part of it's pretty obvious. We spend a lot of time working hard to make money, to amass stuff. And the truth of it is, at the end of our lives, most of it is garbage. Your kids don't want it. Your grandchildren don't want it. You know, the collection of carved whatever, or the paperweights, or whatever crap you've spent tens, hundreds, or millions of dollars collecting all over the world. Nobody wants it. And it doesn't represent you in anyone's heart or mind. I have a friend who belongs to the temple who's a firefighter. And I asked him, what do people grab when they really have to run? He said, people, pets, and pictures, period. And I thought, why pictures? What value, what material value is there to a picture? And the answer is none. But what is valuable about a picture is it represents a moment in time. And time is our most valuable treasure. And so an ethical will is a statement to your children, grandchildren, family, friends. Many people don't have children, to their loved ones, about the value of the time they spent together, and how and your hopes and wishes and dreams for how those loved ones will use their precious time going forward, right? Because it's time that's ultimately meaningful. You know, I say in the book that we all get seduced at some point into believing that our net worth and our self-worth are somehow connected, and that our outer material life is an inner life, right?
Right.
I'll just give you the tiniest example. Think of advertising slogans and take the name of the product out and put the word God in, right?
Right.
Like a good neighbor,
God
is there, right?
Right.
Right? So we are constantly sold this idea that products and things have existential spiritual meaning. Have you ever heard of true religion genes, for God's sake? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
True religion genes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are inundated with this idea that the material is spiritual.
Right.
And I say in the book, that's like trying to eat a picture of food. I don't think it's a sin, but I think it's a very sad mistake that we make. And so the book, that chapter, Nobody Wants Your Crap, is a plea for us to focus on the things that will matter in our loved ones' hearts, rather than the things that literally are going to end up at Goodwill. If you're lucky, Goodwill will take them, right?
Yep.
And the way, look, the writing of an ethical will, I think, is extremely important also for something that I call alignment, right? Are your professed values and your lived values in alignment, right? And this is where what you're doing is so important, Amy, because a lot of people will tell you, oh, I believe so much in the state of Israel. Oh, I believe so much in Jewish communal life. Oh, I believe so much in Jewish summer camps. Oh, I believe so much in my synagogue. Oh, I believe so much, in Jewish day schools. And then you look at their checkbook and they're not aligned. Okay, their professed values and their lived values are not aligned.
So true.
Okay, and the writing of an ethical will is an opportunity for all of us to really examine our lives and to really try to be in alignment. These are the things I'm saying to you, my children, that I believe in and that matter. Write that ethical will, and then go get your checkbook and see if you're putting your money where your will is, your ethical will. And for most people, the answer is sort of.
Wow. Great. That's fantastic. I also think another thing, I read a study recently that our children are looking to us for wisdom. You know, today you could go on the internet and you could get a very compelling argument on either side of any issue, and they don't know who to believe. And I really believe as parents and grandparents, we're trusted brands. And I think
right.
that's even more true after we pass. And the friends of mine whose grandparents have done legacy letters and done videos, their kids watch them.
Oh,
So
yes.
I think in this confusing world, it's almost an obligation
Well,
to
it
do
is.
it.
And I'll tell you something else that I learned from my father's Alzheimer's, which is you really never know. I did not know my last conversation with my father was my last conversation with my father.
That,
I didn't know that he would be speaking to me one day, and the next month when I came to visit, he'd stop speaking.
Hmm.
You really never know. So we ought not wait to give our children and our grandchildren our wisdom and our blessings. And I think this is extremely important, and I'm going to be talking about this pretty deeply in the new book, with real authenticity and real honesty and real transparency. Because there's this old Yiddish expression, which is a half truth is a whole lie.
right.
Right? So, you know, it's one thing to write an ethical will that makes you look like a two-dimensional person without flaws from which your children can learn.
Right.
I think it's that third dimension that actually teaches them the most. What do you regret? What do you wish you had done? What are you sorry you did? And that's really being a good ancestor. You know, people ask me all the time, almost jokingly, I think all clergy get asked this, like, hey, Rabbi, what's the meaning of life? You know, people joke, but I answer it. And I think it's related to the Jewish pledge, Jewish future pledge. I think the meaning of life is to live as a good ancestor. You know, we don't think of ourselves as ancestors, but all of us are ancestors, just not yet. So I think a meaningful life is a life lived intentionally as a good ancestor. You know that cleaning line of products called Seventh Generation? You know about that?
No.
It's an environmentally friendly product, a line of cleaning products. They sell it at Whole Foods, you know, dishwashing detergent and laundry detergent. That phrase, Seventh Generation, comes from the law of the great Iroquois nation, Native American tribe, the Iroquois. And their Torah says that whenever the elders of the tribe make a decision, they have to consider the impact of that decision on the seventh generation.
Wow. That's great.
Okay, that's living as a good ancestor. That's a purposeful and meaningful life, because we all know when we live for something or someone beyond ourselves, that's when you find transcendent meaning.
That's so powerful. You know, it's fun. The funder of the Jewish Future Pledge, my co-founder, Mike Levin, when we did this, he was very inspired by the quote in the Talmud that said, I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted it for me.
Yeah, it's
Likewise,
the carob tree.
Yeah.
It's the,
so we say the same thing. Most people I know don't think about tomorrow, though.
Well,
when making decisions.
Right, exactly. And an ethical will is a big part of that. Actually, they do think about tomorrow in their estate plan. They do.
Yeah.
They just think about the wrong tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yeah, it's very powerful. Let me ask you an important question to me. So we're all about securing a vibrant Jewish future. How do we ensure that our kids and grandchildren continue our Jewish legacy?
Well, you know, I run a pretty big synagogue. We're We're now 3 campuses and 2,700 families. And I talk constantly about an anthropological term, the reverse transmission of culture.
Okay.
So let me explain what I mean. Most people believe that the elders bring the young into a tribe, but anthropologists will tell you that isn't true. There's a phenomenon called the reverse transmission of culture. Culture actually trickles upward from child to parent, right? These parents think they're driving their children to our nursery schools. They're wrong. The children are driving them to the synagogue. Okay. So if I were the king of the Jews, which thank goodness I'm not, I would double, triple, quadruple down on early childhood education, day schools, supplementary schools, and Jewish summer camps, because it all trickles upward. You get the kids, you get the parents and the grandparents. So I think it's almost like an acupuncturist needle. Where does the acupuncturist put the needle? He or she puts it in the precise spot where it will have the greatest systemic effect. So imagine, for example, free early childhood, day school, Sunday school, summer camp, and Israel experiences for every Jewish child in America who wants it.
I love it.
Okay, done. The job is done. Assuming we have control over the quality of these programs, of course. Right? They'd have to be properly vetted. I've had this idea for years. When I retire, I'm going to write more books. I don't have the energy to do that, to implement this idea. But we all know that Birthright is the most successful program ever in American Judaism. I think it's something like almost 400,000 kids.
Right.
So it taught us a few things. First of all, everybody likes free. Even rich people like free. Okay. So I want to start a program called Birth Rate instead of Birthright, where if you have one Jewish child, we'll pay for 25% of that child's education all the way up to 18, whatever they want. If you have 2, we're in for 50%. If you will have a 3rd child, okay, we'll go 100%. Because the birth rate among American Jews, non-Orthodox American Jews, is 1.7 per couple. Replacement rate is 2.1. We're dying. Okay, we're disappearing. We need to have more babies, and not just to have Jewish babies biologically, but to have learned, proud Jews. So I think if we could combine an effort to increase birth rate along with really doubling down on the pediatric part of Judaism, I think we win. We also need, and this may not make me very popular with some of my colleagues, we need better coming out of the seminaries. We need better rabbis and better cantors and better educators. It's, we just have to do better. Because without good leadership, I had the head of a movie studio once say to me, Steve, it all comes down to talent. So I think we need to really invest in children and really invest in training the best and the brightest and encouraging them to go into professional Jewish life.
I'm all in. I love it. I am 100% sure day schools, camping, and Israel experiences work.
Yep.
And it's the day school, the price of day school is out of control. Camp has just been instrumental in my kids' life. So
if it wasn't for a Jewish summer camp, you'd be talking to just another mediocre Jewish lawyer right now.
Which Jewish summer camp?
I went, the really formative camp for me was Olin Saying Ruby in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, the Reform Movements camp in the Midwest. Changed my life.
I never heard of that one.
What about you?
Well, it was really my kids. My boys went to a camp called Avoda, and my daughter went to Morashah, and it was a game changer for all of them. I have such,
Yeah.
And so is it for the Israel experiences.
And by the way, dollar for dollar, best return on our investment you could hope for is a Jewish summer camp.
Yeah, it's a great experience. It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you one last question, because I actually think we're way over time. We might get in trouble with Miller Inc. What visions and hope do you have for the Jewish future? And what is something each one of us could do besides have more babies, I guess?
Well, that's a big one.
It's a little late for me.
Not just have them, but make them part of a Jewish community. I think that the combination that America offers Jews of freedom, capitalism, and Torah is unprecedented in Jewish history. And that freedom is both good news and terrible news. It's good news because it means we have the freedom to create a Jewish renaissance in this country. It's bad news because we have the freedom to shorten our names and shorten our noses and disappear. It's both. You know, I think it was Bertrand Russell who said we should stop congratulating people on their freedom until we see what it is they actually choose to do with it. Right? There are two kinds of freedom from and freedom to.
It's Passover, right?
Right. Well, think about it. What is Passover? Freedom from slavery.
Right.
But what is Shavuot? Freedom to embrace the Torah. Right? I don't think freedom from means very much until you figure out what it's freedom, what it gives you freedom to do.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Right? So my hope for the Jewish future is that we use our freedom in this extraordinary place for Jews, extraordinary, to create the Jewish Renaissance that is within our grasp. And it's everything I said before. We need better, more and better Jewish leaders. We need to put our money where our real values are. And we need to fund the entire generation of young children in a way that gives them complete access to the best of Jewish life. And then I have no doubt and great faith and hope for the future. I really, really do.
I want to just add to that. We got to get everybody learning Torah, because for me, it was such a game changer. You know, who knew that our religion had all this wisdom? I spent, was bat mitzvahed and confirmed and missed the entire thing.
Well, this is part of this reverse transmission of culture. If you've got a kid in day school, you're going to learn some Torah.
Yeah. Well, I learned it.
I
learned it at a Torah class, but
if you've got a kid in nursery school, you're going to celebrate Shabbat in your home. So it really works. And it's really there. You know, it's sort of that metaphor I used before about standing knee deep in a river and dying of thirst, right? Where it's right in front of us and it's completely possible. And this sounds very arrogant. I don't mean it to be. I mean it to be encouraging. We've taken a synagogue and grown it to 3 campuses and 2,700 families. And 2 sleepaway camps and a conference center and a social service center where we feed hundreds of thousands of our poor and hungry neighbors, where we give free dental services, free legal aid, free vision care. It's all possible. And Jews all over this country do it for museums. They do it for universities. They do it all over this country for so many good things. We need to do it for ourselves.
That's the Jewish Future Pledge. That's the Jewish Future Pledge. Wait, I have a question from my friend Joe Goldblatt. So I want to ask you, Rabbi Leader, I find it for some easier to write a check than to serve on a board. How do we encourage more young people to serve as leaders of the Jewish communal organizations so they're stewarding for the Jewish Future Pledge? Thanks, Joe, for future generations.
Yeah. Well, I think there's nothing wrong with a check. But I think in terms of bringing in young Jews into positions of leadership, I think it goes back to what I was saying about what's coming out of the seminaries. I think we need to really work hard to recruit and to support and to educate and then put into the field the best of the generation as professional Jewish leaders, not just volunteers. Because it's the professional Jewish leaders who will gather around them the right young people to move the entire enterprise forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, they're telling me our time is up. Rabbi Leader, this was awesome. I really want the first webinar when the book comes out on the ethical will.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be with you and everyone else. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Me too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.